this one is about the psychology of getting your way, right? So, how many of us have watched Devil Wears Prada? Of us have watched? Okay. Old one. Yeah. Yeah. So, if you remember in that movie, Miranda Priestley, right? At every instance, she just states her preference and it gets done, right? She does not ask somebody do, does not request, does not order, nothing. She just says something and it gets done, right? So why is it that happening, right? Is it because of her position in the organization, what people think about, what will the consequences of not dying it, right? Could be many things, right? So there is this psychologist Robert Cialdini. He wrote this book Influence in '84, and more recently he's wrote a book called Persuasion. So what he says is that he's spent a lifetime studying why people say yes, right? And what the summary of what he studied is that the ask is already made before the person asks, right? So meaning that when I am going to going to say yes to something, it's before the somebody is actually made that statement, and not necessarily because of that person doing it. Right? Some of the examples that he talks about is a few experiments where he said, if I show some numbers to you and then ask you to guess the price of a car, depending upon the range of the numbers that I showed, you would give a lower number or a higher number to that price of the car. The anchor, yeah. And so the other thing will be, for example, somebody asks you a question, perhaps you saying, are you an adventurous person? And you say yes. Subsequently, you are more likely to agree to a risky activity because you not only said yes to somebody, but you said yes to yourself as well, right? So that in some sense is what we're going to discuss. How does that setting happen, and how does that result in people getting what they want in this whole process, right? So we do a few kind of show of hands, right? Raise your hand if you've ever walked into a meeting already knowing exactly how it would end, because the real decision has already been made before. Right? Keep your hand up if you've ever been the one who made sure of that outcome before the meeting ever started. If you could do that, right? And raise your hands if you have got into a meeting, agreed to something, but then came out thinking, why did I do that? Right? Right. So this is about how we get those. How does that happen in a setting, right? So the first question is, how do we read the room, right? And this is an example that I want to share of time when I was in an organization, in a manufacturing company, and we had gone to China to meet our counterparts, and there was some work that I was doing with my peer there before going to China, and there were some discussions about her point of view on a few things, and she was giving a very clear, logical point of view, right? But when she went into the facility, the plant, and we're sitting with her manager, and everybody, she flipped the position. It was no longer what she had shared earlier, but it was something different. So sometimes this is called as the HiPPO effect. This is the highest paid person's opinion, which prevails, right? So how do we, when you're entering the room, my question for you is, right, how do you actually read the room and figure out who is possibly the person who is kind of the decision maker? Have you had such situations earlier? And if so, how have you been able to do that identification? From a training perspective, I'm sure you're...
So many a time these kind of instances happen. While we are walking in the room, we already know that who is the decision maker. Okay, and somewhere we also know that what is the decision that is going to come out of it. Okay, now how? Because while we are doing the entire planning, we have kept that person in mind. This is what he would prefer. This is the outcome that he is looking at. This would be his strategy. This is his style of working, this is his personality. Okay, so when we keep the decision maker in mind while we are doing the entire planning, okay, so it is like, you know somebody so well, you understand somebody so well and align with them, okay, so that you actually get to know that what he is thinking and what points he might come out of. That is where, I would say the plan is entirely made in a way to what he wants.
So how would you think that's something? So there are situations where hierarchy determines a lot, like in the case of my thing, right? But in some places the hierarchy might not determine. So are there situations like that you've seen where you had an opportunity to figure out? You might not have get it, you might have got it, you may not have got it, but at least figure out who.
So I have seen two styles of presentations, right? One is very inductive where it's answers first and it just depends on the attention span of the audience. Like she said, you know a little bit who's going to be the decision maker. If it's democratic, then you're addressing, let's take this room as an example. I just met them today, but I can tell that, basis the limited interaction, that they would prefer data driven intellects. I'm not dealing with the company's owner who is just like, very short attention span. So I would then build a story and then ask for something. Whereas where I've seen in many cases where it's either the top boss or the companies like promoters, attention span is so low that I answer first. Like, why am I here? 30 seconds. Because I don't know if he'll get a call and leave. So I'm like, I'm here for a $2 million funding. Then I double click, then I triple click, then I go deep and say that why, the answer first and then go into the details. So you build that style of argument or presentation. So, and in the middle, like, so this was told to be by one of the promoters, that if you're winning, I mean if you're leading, then just quit, no, right away. You got what you wanted, then don't stretch it. So in the middle of the presentation he said, okay, approved, done. So I don't want to even see the rest. So both styles work, right? When you are dealing with peers, I believe data driven reasoning and that has helped. A personal experience again.
I think watching Dilbert definitely helps a lot. Because so in Dilbert, right, there's a data guy, right? You know that there'll be a data guy in the room, there'll be a loud guy in the room, right? There'll be the cat, right? Who would be ready to sort of screw you, and there'll be the guy who'll talk the least but carry the most weight, right? And then you need to make arguments against everyone or for them.
So have you been in a situation where, so there is obviously a situation where we are getting in and there is in some way an inferred hierarchy already existing in decision making or and all that, but then sometimes it might not be, right? So is there a situation where you've seen such a thing happen when you have to make that effort to read the room to know who that person is?
Yeah, I think that happens not very often, but because very often we know who are the people in the room. So, see, if we know the people in the room, some of the style which works is, how do you influence them even before coming to the room? I think I always say work one-on-one and even get your way so that everybody concurs in the room to what you are finally proposing. So, a lot of informal one-on-one is required before even you come to the room. But your question is, suppose I don't know the people in the room. Those are not too often, but I think that's where the person who is proposing something or wanting to get something done, it's the quick intuition which has to work. By connecting with them, have some question, have some quick interaction to figure out where it is going, and then probably either take the room to the decision or pick up what each one wants to say and get the work done via voice vote or something. I think it would depend on situation, but in the corporate world where we are working, we often know who the decision makers are. Sometimes I guess people who are going to customers or client space, they may not know them beforehand, but it is always good to do the homework. So you know who is the decision maker where you are going, and I think connecting with them beforehand or through their colleagues to know how that person makes decision, it helps them on the spot.